could tell us a little bit about your role as a mine action officer for UNOAU.
Good morning, Sandra. No problem at all. My role as the Mine Action Officer is basically I'm the focal point for providing support to the African Union and member states. And that role really includes facilitating other agencies like UNMAS, UNDP, and coordinating responses. For example, support to Mali was one of the areas that we worked on. And also providing technical advice and sometimes running training.
So how would you say that your role helps the UN and AU in their partnership for peace and security?
Well, I think one of the complaints that I get from the AU sometimes is that they are approached by multiple agencies on many different subjects regarding explosive weapons. And I think they really appreciate having a single point of contact who they know that can facilitate communications. And I think it's appreciated by the other agencies as well, because it just streamlines the process.
And what would you say are some of the challenges of your work in mine action?
It's been changing over the years. I started in mine action in 1996. In the early days, we were perceived as being the good guys, good girls, and we couldn't actually do any harm. We often would be able to work on both sides of a conflict, like in Sri Lanka, with no problem at all. One of the challenges that we have now is that the mine action groups and organizations are actually seen as legitimate targets. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in Somalia and Mali, they're directly targeted as they're seen as being part of the conflict. I think that is one of the major drawbacks at the moment. I spent a year in Mogadishu in 2015, and we were not able to go anywhere without armoured vehicles and force protection. So for me, that's one of the biggest challenges. Also, in a way, this challenge has been changing. It was very easy for people to ignore the landmine problem because it only affected people normally out in the countryside. It didn't affect people in the cities so much. Some would argue that with me. But now with the increased use of explosive improvised devices, 90% of the casualties are now civilians in built-up areas. And it is very difficult for the leadership of countries to actually ignore this problem. In fact, they're quite often targeted, as we see very often in Somalia.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of challenges, how would you say that COVID-19 is impacting mine action in Africa?
It's, obviously it's having an impact. I have colleagues that have not had leave for almost 6 months because they've been unable to travel. So that has a dramatic impact on the individuals, and it's put an unfair strain on the people that are in the field working, and then others like myself that have been unable to return to the office and have been working from home. So it's put a disproportionate burden on certain people. But then the work has been ongoing. It has not stopped. So demining has continued during the whole of the COVID pandemic.
Mm-hmm. And Michael, what would you say are some opportunities for mine action in this time? You've talked about the challenges and the impact of COVID-19, but what are some opportunities to do more?
Well, one of the things that I was working on with the African Union before I went to Gaza on an 18-month deployment was a South-South cooperation. And the idea is to get AU member states that have experience and resources to support other member states with less experience and resources. And this has worked really well. there is a roster of ammunition technicians that have been trained up, and these are all African technicians that are on standby to be deployed when we see accidents like we saw with the explosive store in Equatorial Guinea. In Benin, which I should note does not have a mine problem, they've set up a Centre of Excellence training centre and are providing training for other countries that do have explosive problems. And they've actually deployed some of their instructors to Mali to get on the ground experience. So I think what I'm saying is, if there's greater coordination, there's a lot of experience and resources that are already out there that can be put to use.
That's very interesting. Michael, can you tell me about some memories that have stuck with you during your career in mine action? You've been in this line for a very long time. Can you share some memories with us?
Yes, I am a dinosaur. I agree. I would say, so just as background, I spent 15 years in the British Army, and one of my jobs as a combat engineer was to train people to use and lay landmines. I was at the training regiment school, and we used to teach people that the purpose of mines was to deny the enemy to the ground, to funnel the enemy into killing areas, and to place a burden on their medical system. And I fully believed that, and that was what I trained, and I think I was quite good at it. Then I did my first deployment with a Norwegian NGO into Sarajevo. And the first cafeteria I went into, there were 4 guys at the counter, all with crutches and missing limbs. And it really struck home to me, the real impact. And then, I mean, that was nothing compared to the impact on the community of not being able to use the fields, not being able to go to school, not being able to collect water. So that was a real eye-opener for me from my background and training. On a positive note, I think the best thing that ever happened was the first minefield that I ever released personally was in Sri Lanka. And I was working with a demining agency, a Japanese one. And we had a big event, and the local mayor came to the event and all the local community, and we released the field to the community. It was demined, it had been cleared, and everybody was hesitant to walk into the area because they were worried there were still mines. So I took the mayor by his hand and walked into the cleared area. And then everybody started laughing, and the local community all ran into the field, and that was just an amazing feeling.
Oh, wow. And lastly, Michael, I want to ask you, what is your message to anyone that's listening to you right now? What would you like to tell them about mine action?
I guess it's very easy to ignore the problem. I mean, the numbers of people that have been killed and injured have reduced significantly since the landmine ban. But actually, the problem is starting to increase again because of the use of improvised explosive devices. And I really think that mine action should get more attention, because the knock-on effects of what we do are just amazing. Opening roads, opening schools, opening wells, allowing normalcy after war are really not perceived as effects from the clearance, but they are. And the thing is, if we ignore it, we will see countries falling back into conflict, because every time somebody steps on a mine, it just reminds them of the conflict, and it increases the tensions. So I would lobby everybody to take this seriously and offer any support they can.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. We have Mine Action Day coming up on the 4th, and this was Michael Hans, our Mine Action Officer with UNOAU.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.